I'm still an apprentice at forgiveness. But I come back to this book every now and then. So
give that to Linda, and she can order one.
yeah, I mean, I'll let her look at it first. She may look at it and think, well, Tim might like it, but it's not worth our library. So I'm going to kind of use this book and tonight as kind of a bridge, and I'm going to use tonight as the ending of the forgiveness series and a beginning of looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And that'll take us into early December, and then that might be about it. So because in December, we'll have one Wednesday night, we will have the children's program. We will not have Bible study, and then we've got the holidays and all that. So this might go, Sermon on the Mount might take us to the end of the year. So tonight, for our scripture passage, we will look at the Beatitudes. So that's Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 10. And I hope this will be a good way for you to see the Beatitudes in a different way. So in talking about forgiveness, I've talked about it in three main steps. That the first step is to work on remembering. And so, you know, we oftentimes say, well, forgive and forget. And in terms of what I've looked at, it's been helpful for me about forgiveness is it's almost impossible to forget. But you can work at remembering other things. And so some of those things are other things about the person who hurt you, particularly if it's a family member, if it's a friend. You have a relationship that's bigger and beyond whatever they did to hurt you. But also it has to do with remembering who you are and to get your anger out. Remember those anger and get that out, and then move on from your grievance story. I've been wronged. This is not right. Get the anger out, and then move to more of a justice story. What's the right thing? And that's kind of where you kind of move towards forgiveness. So the second step last week was about healing, and that in healing we need to go through this process of understanding that we've been hurt, but that we still control our feelings. So when somebody does something to hurt you, you can feel powerless, right? If somebody slanders you in the church or at your work or at school and says something wrong about you, and you've been hurt in some way, you can't stop whatever they say. If a rumor is gossiping about you in your network of friends, you can't go run and stop it, right? You're powerless to stop that. Or if you get fired unjustly on your job or whatever happens, we feel powerless when those things happen to us. When a family member gets mad at us for some reason, or has an addiction or some other problem, we feel powerless with that. But the thing we have power of is our feelings. So we control how we respond to anything that happens to us. So we're not just a victim. We control how we're going to respond to everything in our lives. And so part of the healing process is regaining your power, taking control of your feelings, taking control of your response. Your body, you may react angry, mad, upset, but you have the power to process through that and then move to another stage. So you don't have to stay angry. You can move through that into a positive way. So the healing part is really all about you reclaiming your own responsibility, your own accountability, your own power that you have. You have the power to control your feelings, and you have the power ultimately to decide whether you will forgive or not forgive. And there's something positive about that. When you realize that, and you realize I'm not a victim of circumstance, I control how I respond, it does bring healing to us. So the first two steps, remembering and then healing. And the final step really is about the doing. It's doing the forgiving. Like you go through the remembering part, you get the anger out, you work on your own healing, controlling your emotions, your feelings, taking responsibility for them. But the end result is, if you decide, I'm going to forgive, then you got to do it. And it's not that it's ever easy, but doing it inside your head is a lot easier than going to the person and talking to them, right? So that's where we're going to end tonight. So let's open our Bibles with Matthew chapter 5 with the Beatitudes, and we're going to look at the Beatitudes as a way of guiding us through forgiveness. And I said 1 through 10. We're going to go through 12. So Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, the disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." So let's kind of keep your Bibles maybe open to that so you can kind of see these three. So there's kind of nine, there's main kind of 9 verses of the Beatitudes, with the last one at the end kind of kicks back and kind of reaffirms the last one. So I want to think about the Beatitudes as kind of 3 sections of 3, and kind of going with these 3 steps that we've talked about the last couple weeks and then tonight. So if we think about these as 3 kind of distinct ways of moving towards forgiveness, the first 3 helps us in the remembering part. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Volner, who wrote this book on forgiveness through the Beatitudes, translate poor in spirit as recognizing our total need of God. Other people have written other things about what poor in spirit means, but I like the way she said that. To be poor in spirit means you have a need. If you're just poor, you have a need of money. So poor in spirit, you need spirit, you need God. So we need God at this point. And when you have been wronged and you're mad as a hornet, the first place to start is with God. God is the one who can help you go through this. God is the one you got to get to give this to. Blessed are those who mourn. Again, remembering. So you're remembering God is going to guide you through this forgiveness process. And mourning is remembering what happened to you. Get that out. Blessed are you who mourn. And of course, Jesus' response is, for you will be comforted. And the comfort may not happen right away, but it will come. Blessed are the meek is the next thing. Now, Flora, in her article in her book about this, I was kind of wondering, like, how's she going to work this in? And she talks about how that oftentimes when we're wronged and we're in that first stage, that angry stage, we want to get revenge. And we talked about this 2 weeks ago, and I think, Kevin, you might have mentioned how all that does is it just makes things worse. So you become a prison of your own anger and your vengeance. And so blessed are the meek. That's where we decide not to strike back. So we don't let our grievance, our hurt, come out of us in a destructive way. think I mentioned to you that week that one time when I was hurt really badly and very angry, I went out, took a bunch of tennis balls, went to tennis court, and whacked those balls for about an hour as hard as I could. Didn't care where they went, but that kind of got it out of me. Didn't hurt anybody at all. So that kind of thing, get your anger out that way. But in terms of people, blessed are the meek. Don't respond back. So in these ways, she says, we need God in this point. Let God guide you through this. Grieve your loss. Get your pain out. But at that point, work on meekness, humility as a pathway towards forgiveness. Let's see what I was going to say here. Yeah, so that's all about peace. Any questions on those three as a beginning point towards forgiveness? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. So the next trilogy kind of goes with the second step I talked about last week, healing. And the first statement is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And this is kind of where in healing you start moving away from your grievance story, I'm a victim, I was wronged, I'm angry, towards a justice story. What really happened here? What's fair? I don't want vengeance. I'm still wronged, but I can control my feelings. What's the right thing here? What's the right thing in this broken relationship? And that's the first step, hunger and thirst for righteousness. So justice is a piece of that. And this is important as the first one of the trilogy. The next one is blessed are the merciful. But justice, hungering and thirsting for righteousness, that comes before merciful. Because if you start with mercy, then your forgiveness becomes permission giving. You become a doormat. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for someone to feel like they have permission to hurt you over and over and over again. Now, yes, Peter did say, Jesus, if I forgive somebody 7 times, is that good? And Jesus says, you haven't hardly touched the surface. It's 70 times 7. Yes, God wants to be people who will continue to forgive, but that's in working through forgiveness in a healthy way. That's not making yourself a doormat. So in this second stage of healing, we start with, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We want what's done. We want what we're going to do to be the right thing. Not vengeance, but justice. Then we can talk about mercy. Then we can talk about our hearts being merciful after we start thinking about what's the right thing here to happen. And the thing I want to say here is, as I mentioned last week, is that mercy is empowering. As you decide to say, this person who hurt me, this brother in your family, or your adult child, or somebody in the family who's hurt you, when you take control of your feelings and say, I'm going to work towards a place of forgiveness, it can change Thanksgiving immensely, right? Because when there's a hurt in the family, it makes those special times very painful. So it's empowering for us to say, I can take control of my life, I can take control of my feelings, and I will work out some way of forgiving this family member. And all other relationships, that's that same way. So you stop being a victim when you begin taking control of your feelings and start deciding, I will choose to forgive because I have that power. The last of that trilogy, blessed are the pure in heart, is an important piece because, in the cycle of healing, the revenge path is, I always want to hurt somebody and make them feel pain. If you're working on being pure heart, you don't have the need to seek revenge, and you can let that go. Let me stop there on that trilogy. Any thoughts on those 3 pieces? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. So the third set gets us to the big step for today, which is in doing the forgiveness. So the third set of Beatitudes reveal that good and honest people face unfair attacks, and they're all right here, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. So it doesn't matter who you are, these things can happen to all of us. Jesus was trying to prepare all of us. And so at this point, it gets us to the point of doing the forgiveness. We've worked on remembering the positive things to remember. We've worked on our healing, taking control of our feelings. Now we got to go back to doing it. So the last two Beatitudes remind us, too, that forgiveness doesn't necessarily make everything better. Remember, very first week I talked about sometime reconciliation is different from forgiveness. We hope there's going to be reconciliation, but it doesn't always happen. And in some cases, it shouldn't happen. The example I gave you was somebody who's a domestic violence abuser. You don't want to, you hope that the person he abused can come to forgiveness for her own sake, but probably they should never live together again. So, we hope reconciliation happens, but it's not always going to happen. But that doesn't mean you can't forgive, and that doesn't mean you can't be freed from the pain that you hold if you don't forgive. So forgiving is your responsibility. Whether the person who hurts you accept that's forgiveness and then repents and changes behavior, that's for them. And as all of you all know, we can't control that, right? We can't control other people. And the difficulties in relationships often happen when we think we can. When we think we can get that person to change. No, they have to decide to change. We can do our part. We can forgive. We can not count it against them, but then they will have to repent and change their behaviors. The peacemaker beatitude is a blessing upon which embodies wholeness. You all are familiar with the term shalom, right? We've heard that in the Bible. Jews today use the word shalom. Shalom is a Hebrew word which means peace, but it's not a lack of conflict. It means more than that. It means wholesome. It means well-being. It means harmony. So if you say the word shalom to somebody, you're offering not just peace to them, but a wholeness to them, that they're whole in body, mind, and soul. And so the beatitude about peacemaker is somebody who shares shalom. So shalom is when relationships are operating in the way they should. Love shared back and forth, people being whole. So to be a peacemaker is somebody who shares shalom. And while we can't control the actions of somebody else, we can be somebody who shares shalom. And whenever we offer peace to somebody else and we take away a lot of the biting comments, it's amazing how people slowly change. I mentioned to you, I forget which week it was, in Fred Luskin's book, the guy who is not a religious person but works at this forgiveness center at Stanford University, shared the story about Andy, whose mother-in-law was just on him all the time. And it made Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter and other times when family got together just miserable. And he would not be happy about going. He would complain to his wife. His wife loved her mother, even though her mother didn't really love her husband so much. And he finally decided that he would work on changing his relationship with his mother-in-law out of love for his wife. And so when his mother-in-law would start with little biting comments, he would just not respond. He would just let it go off his back like water off a duck's back. And it first made his wife much happier, which made his marriage much happier, which made the trips from their house to the in-laws' house at Thanksgiving much better, made all that better. And then slowly his mother-in-law changed her attitude. because he stopped responding. You know, so often we don't like to think this when somebody is wrong to us or mean to us. We don't like to think that we've contributed, but oftentimes the way we respond, even if we had a reason to, I'll say you have the right to not be talked about or talked down to, but it doesn't help the situation, does it? So when he began working at being a peacemaker and offering shalom to his mother-in-law, in time, she began responding more positively. So it took him a while, and that's why forgiveness always takes a while. So the one who seeks to forgive seeks wholeness for themselves, shalom for themselves, and for the other person if they accept it. But we understand we're offering it. We can't make them accept it. So the wholeness is first for ourselves, and then we offer it to the person who we have this broken relationship with. We can't control them, but we can control our feelings. All right, the third set. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you. Any thoughts or comments on those? This is the quietest y'all been in 3 weeks. All right, beyond her book, I want to just talk about a few things about this third step, about doing forgiveness. And these are my thoughts. These are not infallible thoughts. There's not expert thoughts. This is just how I've kind of worked through things. So we've talked about these first two steps, and now we're going to actually do the forgiveness. So before you go to somebody to say you forgive them, to offer forgiveness, make sure you thought about what are you asking for. So name the offense and name who the offender is and talk about your feelings. So before you forgive somebody, be clear about who you're forgiving, what they did, and why you're doing this. So how did they hurt you? So sometimes people hurt us in painful ways, and they can be oblivious. It's possible for people to be oblivious that they've hurt you. So you want to talk about what happened with you. How did your feelings get hurt? In what way? So that they will understand this. So let's think about this. If there's been a spat between you and a married couple, do both husband and wife share equally in this offense? Or did one of them really hurt you and the other one was kind of caught in marital loyalty? So there may be different things there, right? So you don't want to assume that the spouse necessarily feels this way. It's possible the spouse doesn't really know the whole picture. Or maybe the spouse got, the version from their spouse and they don't know really how you felt about it. So be clear about what you're asking for. And you may say, I don't know if both of you realize this, so that you're talking to both of them and both of them get your picture and understanding. Otherwise, it can be more miscommunication, and your forgiveness may be offered, but they may then feel like you've unfairly judged them or whatever. So when you're ready to forgive, name the offense, what happened, who you're going to asking forgiveness of. If there's more than one person, do they equally share in whatever happened, or is there some different level here? And then finally, you got to talk about your feelings, how this hurts you, what happened. Second thing is that in this whole process, and this kind of goes to the healing process too, but don't take it personally. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? You're a person, right? Luskin, the guy from Stanford, says that to become a forgiving person, we should all develop thicker skins. Now that's easier said than done, right? try not to take personal offense at everything, even when sometimes it was personal, okay? Luskin write this: the path of forgiveness involves a choice to rarely, if ever, take offense. This does not mean that we condone unkindness. And it does not mean we become a doormat. He's emphatic about that. That is one of the worst things that can happen if we allow people to use our forgiving spirit to hurt us on purpose again and again and again. That destroys relationships. But it means that we save being upset only for those situations where getting upset helps us. We try not to take hurtful actions so personally, and we do not blame the offender for how we are feeling. How we are feeling is our responsibility, and we will explain it. So the offender is responsible for his or her action. We are responsible for our feelings. So let me give you an example of this. And I have heard this. In my 35 years of ministry, twice I've had this said to me. One time, a mother who was struggling with her drug-addicted son yelled in frustration to me, and it was also in this guy's book, "Why is he doing this to me?" He wasn't doing it to her. He had a drug problem. It wasn't his point to hurt his mother or his father for that matter. But she took it personally. All the stuff that's been going on, the stealing the money out of her purse when he was home because he would run out of money, all that stuff. He wasn't doing that to her. He was doing it because of his drug problem. In fact, he felt in this case, felt a lot of guilt and shame for what he was doing, but he also felt trapped. That's what addiction does. So in this case, I sat with this mother and listened and finally helped her to think about that it really wasn't directed at her. Yes, what he was doing was terrible, and it would be great if she could get to a place of forgiving him. It would help in all this stuff. But he really wasn't doing this at her. And once she kind of got that, and she did finally get there, it lowered her anger, right? Because she was taking this personally. Why is my son personally hurting me? Why is he lying to me? He was lying to her. He was taking petty cash out of her pocketbook for all this stuff. But that's what the addiction did to him. He wasn't purposely hurt her. Once she got that lowered her anger, which then allowed her to begin working on understanding who he was and understanding this is what addicted people do. So that just helped her to get another step down the road to forgiveness. Sometimes, even when the person says, "You did this to me, I hate you," still try not to take it personally. Now, as a parent, I can say, I've heard those words. Anybody else I won't make any true confession, but you may have also heard that. Sometimes people say things they really don't mean. And if we can try to work on not taking it personally, coming back to it and saying, it's not okay for you to say, "You hate me." That's not okay. That did hurt me for a little bit. I understand you're in a different place. But if you can talk about that from a way without being angry about it, it can get you to forgiveness a lot better. Is this making sense about the try not to take offense? I know this sounds crazy head talk, but yeah.
It makes sense, but it's hard to do.
Yes. Especially when your emotions are tied up. Yes.
It's hard not to take it personally when they make it personal.
Yeah, when they say, "I hate you," "You did this to me." "Mom and Dad, you're cramping my style. You're doing this." Yeah. Yes. I can joke with you all about this, I think. So you all know I have certain perspectives on things. When one of my daughters said to me, "Dad, you're just so conservative." Why do you think this way? You make girls think this way. I'm thinking like, how could you talk to me about that? I'm the one who raised you to be a free-thinking young woman, I had to, she said, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's where she's at. She's just going through this growing process. It's not about you. But yeah. I'm saying, say it again. Yes, thank you, Doug. That's great. Don't play the martyr. Yeah. So get your anger out, your victim story out in a different way. But in trying to work towards forgiveness, you are empowered. You have control of your feelings and your responses. Yeah. Don't play the martyr. Thank you, Doug. That's great. So. Oh, you can claim it. You can claim it. At least in this room, you can claim it. So taking responsibility is I failed to understand your feelings. I failed to set this up. Taking it personally is I am a failure. Big difference. Big difference. Taking responsibility is I couldn't provide what she wanted. So at that moment with my daughter, I had not been able to provide what she wanted at that time. And she was all over me about how I had responded to her in certain ways. Taking it personally would be, I'm not a good dad. And so the difference is we want to take responsibility for our actions. What did we do in all the give and take of this relationship? But do not take it personally. So I am a good dad. I could have had better foresight at some times. And that's kind of how we have to work. If we do that, it's easier to forgive. So then going to the person and saying, you're naming the offense, you're naming what they did, who did it, and your feelings, but you're working at not taking it personal. So we don't want the emotion to be all wrapped up there. We want to be clear about what's happened and how it affected us, but we want to forgive. In this process, I will say, we've already talked about in remembering how to change your attitude about the person. So before you go to the person, make sure you have been able to change your attitude about the person. You've remembered all those positive things, and you're going to emphasize that's where you're at. So when you go to talk to the person and say, I forgive you, I need to forgive you, make sure you're remembering all those positive things. Don't stay just with the offense. You're going to name the offense, you're going to name your feelings, but you're also remembering the positive things in this relationship so that the energy, the emotion that you're sharing is that you love this person and your relationship is broken and you want to offer forgiveness to help repair it. So make sure the attitude, you've got that correct. And then finally, you're saying the words of forgiveness. Lewis Smedes, Christian theologian, has 10 things that he offers. So I'm going to say these. I'll say these slowly for me to write them down. But so he just says, take your time. In these 3 weeks, I've talked about how this is a real forgiveness is something that goes over time. And so even when you finally got to the point of, I'm ready to forgive, I'm ready to talk to the person, take time about this. Think about what you're going to do. If it's still emotional to you, y'all may have noticed. Remember when we had a communion a few weeks ago for World Communion Sunday? Had 4 of the young people share the bread. Well, one of them was a little nervous, and she was talking like this, going like this, and Tori and I had to slow her down. So taking your time, because this can be emotional, and you want to make sure you get a deep breath, take your time. Second thing, you need to think ahead of time, sizing up your risk. How will she respond? How well will you communicate? So let's think about this. If you're forgiving somebody in the family and the emotions have been really high through some of this, think about how the response. Does somebody else need to be there? Just somebody else need to be a witness or just to be around, so that that nothing goes wrong in how this is operating. Okay. you may need to wait for a signal, right? So you're thinking about forgiveness, but you've had some interaction with this person. Is there some signal that they might be receptive to you forgiving them? Okay? Sometimes when some people hurt us, they're not oblivious. They know they've done something wrong, and there's guilt or there's shame involved, and they don't know how to process that. And sometimes you may be ready to forgive, but the other person may not be ready for you to forgive them. I know that sounds odd, but so can you, and I don't have any, I have no good illustrations for this other than just say wait for a signal. You know people, get a sense, is it a good time to do it? Because it's okay for you to forgive somebody for a while in your mind and between you and God, and to talk to your spouse or your other close friends, I've forgiven so-and-so, but I don't think they're ready. But when I get that sense, I want to say it to them. So let that be a piece. That's number 3. 4, it says do it sideways. Sometimes being direct with somebody is not good. So can you start off the conversation? You know there's still some tension between you. Something's happened. Is there a way to ease into the conversation? Okay, so come in sideways. Talk about, is there something else you can talk about to get ready to do this and offer forgiveness, particularly if things are touchy. Number 5, you may want to begin at the end. I forgive you, and here's why. So, because if you start off saying, you did this thing to me and this hurt me, they may be thinking about this as an accusation. But you want to start saying, I've come today, I want to forgive you, I want to talk about this, and start off with the good news. Okay, start at the end, let them know, this is going to be a good conversation. Number 6, don't claim holy motives. In other words, don't be self-righteous. Don't talk about you're such a good person to be forgiving. Don't leave that out. God will take care of all the holy stuff. Number 7, be ready to improvise. So as you're thinking about what might happen, how the conversation might go, be ready to dance on your feet a little bit. Number 8, try to make it short. Don't let it linger on. It doesn't have to. Now, sometimes there can be a cathartic experience and it may go on long, but plan for the actual forgiveness to be short. And try to keep it light. Is there a way to keep it light? Don't make it too heavy. Number 9 is keep it light. And number 10, give the other person time. They may not be ready to respond right then. You've been working on this. They may not have been working on this. And if it's somebody who's oblivious, and as I mentioned before, there are oblivious people out there, they may need to sink in a bit to respond. All right, there's the 10 things on helping us to forgive. Any other thoughts and comments? It's time for choir, so I better let choir members go. Was this helpful?
I think you have to know your audience, because the other person may be sitting there, one, not really, like you said, oblivious to that they hurt you, and you know them, and you know that they're going to be sorry about that, and they're going to carry a burden, but to know that you're up front with them, you hurt me, and I forgive you. But the other thing is, why are you forgiving me? I didn't do anything.
Right. They can be defensive.
Man, they're not receptive at all for your forgiveness. If anything, your forgiveness to them is an accusation.
Right.
That,
yeah, and that's number 2. Size up your risk.
Size up your risk.
Yep, size up your risk. And if it's not successful at the time, remember, forgiveness is one thing, reconciliation another thing. Hopefully you get reconciliation, if it's possible, but it doesn't always happen. And if you forgive, you can let go of some of the anger, the bitterness you have, and it's better for you. Yeah. Anything else? Dickie? No, I thought you did. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Like I said, I'm just practicing at this.
I forgive you for being 2 minutes over.
Okay. Well, Kathy will have to forgive me, really. So we'll continue on with the Sermon on the Mount as we go into further into chapter 5 in Matthew. So next week. So thank you much. DJ.